Kia ora tātou. Thank you all for coming back. I don't say that lightly. I'm sure the temptation of Poppy Places was strong, so I appreciate you coming back to the meeting. And we will pick up where we left off with one minor amendment that we're simply taking recommendation 2 at this point because there is an alternate option should this fail, which would then affect 3 and 4. So I have a speaker queue to speak on the recommendations. You came into the queue for 2, 3 and 4. If you don't intend to speak on 2 and just 3 and 4, maybe you could drop yourselves out of the queue now, but if you stay in the queue, I'll assume you're speaking on 2, which is that the Council endorses option 2, service delivery by the Council of Carcher Birch House, grounds and coach house. Thank you. So I will ask the Deputy Mayor for her comments.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members might have guessed through some of the question that I was asking that I would have liked to have I would have liked us to be in a position to give the board another opportunity to engage with staff around this. And my earlier intention had been that that may have been able to happen in between this committee meeting and the full council meeting. But upon hearing the officer's advice, I appreciate that that timing's not going to work. And I'm not in a position at the moment where I'm not comfortable that we pause this process because of the nature of this reporting to arts, culture and heritage is that if we hit pause now, we are not going to re-engage in this process until February or March next year. And following that decision, there would still be, I imagine, consultation of some sort, and that would push us past the realm of being able to feed into the long-term plan. So, upon reflection, particularly through questioning from Councillor Harpiter, I'm comfortable with the early engagement between the council and the board. We had the full board attend the workshop. They reviewed the report that was given to them, that was written, that's in front of us, and were given the opportunity to provide some comments. They've come in today, they've made a presentation, and they will have an opportunity through public consultation to again share their views. So I'm comfortable that we have provided opportunities along the way for the voice of the Carcher Birch Trust Board to be heard. I appreciate that they are not satisfied at this point in time with that process, but I'm comfortable that there has been some opportunity and would support us endorsing option 2 at this stage, going out for consultation and allowing a wider a conversation to happen around that. So I'm comfortable with what's proposed, and I will support the recommendations as per the order papers. Thank you.
Councillor Johnson.
Yes, I'm also happy to support this. I did make notes about the points that the board chair raised this morning and put some of those to the officers. But ultimately, I think that delaying this particular decision isn't going to help us any, because if we go back and forth, I think it's going to be difficult to come to a recommendation or a review that the board is happy with if it isn't their preferred option of option 1. So what I would like to do is to take this out to public consultation, and that gives the board, as well as members of the public and any other interested parties, the opportunity to prepare a full response, which can be considered. And as we've found before, very often during consultation, things are raised that were not considered in the original choice to designate something as a preferred option. And so I very much don't want people to get the impression that because we consult on the preferred option, that is definitely what's going to happen. That's very much not the case. The process is designed so that we indicate a preferred option and go out for consultation and then listen to the views of the community, including the views of the board members. And that gives a well-structured process in which all views can come to the table. We can consider those before an actual decision is made. And I think that it's designed to be a robust process. And I'm not sure that there's much to be gained by delaying at this stage. As the Deputy Mayor has commented, I do feel that there was good engagement between Council and board members, certainly at a governance level, ahead of time. And we are listening to the points that are being raised. I noted that several elected members picked up on different points that the Chair mentioned and reflected them back to staff. So at this stage, I think the best thing is to continue onwards, notwithstanding the fact that something may come up during consultation. That means that we don't go ahead with this. And I certainly am open to that as a possibility. So I would prefer that we continue. Let's hear what everyone's got to say. There may well be points raised that none of us have considered so far, and it will give enough time for a considered response. So I'm happy for us to go ahead.
Thank you. Councillor Naylor, you've indicated an alternative motion, which I would suggest means that you would like to speak against this one. You weren't in my queue, so I'm just giving you the opportunity to talk.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm really supportive of the 17A review because I think it is appropriate that we assess the model that we currently have to ensure that what we have going forward is going to be the most effective. In terms of that, I think there are two really important points. One is in terms of the cost effectiveness and value for money, and the other being whether it's effective in achieving the desired goals and outcomes for our community. And I guess that I came today a little bit unsure. I'm not necessarily convinced that option 2 is, well, certainly I'm not convinced that it's my preferred option, and that's because I don't feel like I've got enough information about particularly option 3 to give me certainty of that. I'm not convinced that bringing things in-house is always the preferable option or the most effective way of delivering the outcomes that we're looking for. And in particular, I was interested in the comments in the report about the subset option of option 3 that was about paying a management fee to the tenant to manage the venue, and I see that there's some examples of where that's utilised effectively in other venues, and the officers obviously indicated that we would be required to ask for further information if we wanted that explored further. So the alternate motion that I was going to propose if this one fails, where did I write it down?
It's on the screen.
Oh, it's on the screen, yeah. To seek that further advice on option 3 prior to identifying prior to determining a preferred option to consult on. And I mean, my purpose is not, I don't want things delayed unnecessarily either, but I do think it's really tricky when we consult, because identifying a preferred option can be misunderstood by being a predetermined position, and I certainly, it would have been my preference to consult on all the options, but officers have advised that we need to present a case for change. And so from my perspective, if we actually are needing to present a case for change and identify a preferred option, I think there would be value in us having more information about some of the other options prior to that. So that's why I won't be supporting identifying option 2 at this point.
Thank you. Can we go back to the option? Councillor Harpeter.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I will be supporting option 2, which is recommendation 2, and the reasons being that I think we have gone through 2 Section 17A reviews with Cassia Birch, and I do feel that it is time that we go out and consult with our community and the wider community in that area over this and get that view back from that community over what they feel should happen with this. I have listened really carefully to what the Chair has said and written down quite a number of notes, and I do feel that I can hear that they're very aggrieved with what has happened to date, but I do think that we do need to hear through the consultation process what the community are going to say back to us. And listening to what Councillor Johnson said, which are wise words, I do think that this is now time for us to go through this process. We have gone through this twice. I don't think going backwards is the right step. I think going forward is the right step, and we now need to bite the bullet and go forward, and that's why I do think that option 2 is the right way and go forward. So that's why I'm supporting recommendation 2 and option 2. Thank you.
Thank you. As I move this, you were probably not surprised to know that I do support this recommendation, but not without some uncertainty, actually, because this isn't saying that we think this is the right answer. This is saying, is there a case for change? And I think that there is a case for change. And I'm speaking to the board and the management of Keitcha Birch to say I am not surprised by your passionate defence of option 1. I would be disappointed if we had anything else. You've worked hard and tirelessly over many years, 30 years of this being a CCO, to give us the asset that the city has today. And this should not be taken in any way as a reflection on that. What this is doing is looking to the future and saying what is the most effective way that our community, not council, that our community can get the best out of that asset, that they can appreciate and value the asset as we do, as those of us who were present for the 125th at the weekend experienced. That's what we want for our community, to be able to get the best access and benefit from that asset that we hold in trust for our community. And none of us take that lightly, you least of all. And thank you for your passionate defence of the status quo. But when we go out to the community, we sometimes get things we're not expecting. We get different ideas, different options, and it is important in going out to consultation that we go out with an open mind, but not an empty mind. So that's why we have to put forward a preferred option, that there is something that we think maybe this answers the case for change, but maybe it doesn't, and we look forward to your contribution through the rest of that process. I look forward to hearing from the wider community as what their aspirations are for that space, how we meet their needs. Look forward to hearing from people who use Keitcha Birch, but also people who don't. Look forward to hearing from the breadth of the community, and that's quite a challenge to our consultation process, especially as we go into the summer months when we know consultation can be particularly difficult. So that is a challenge, and one I hope officers feel able to rise to. So on that note, I will put recommendation 2 to the vote, please. That's carried 8 votes in favour, 4 against, no abstentions. Thank you. And then we'll move to recommendations 3 and 4. So the alternate motion lapses because the other one won. So 3, the Council instructs the Chief Executive to undertake public consultation on the preferred option and report back through the Arts, Culture and Heritage Committee. And 4, that attachment 2, confidential, be publicly released as we've decided not to pursue a commercial lease arrangement for Keitcha Birch House, with the information about the terms of Council's catering contract redacted. So, anybody like to comment on those 2? Councillor Johnson.
I suppose it's just to seek clarification that under recommendation 4, we won't be publicly releasing the confidential information until a final decision is made, rather than at this stage before consultation.
When will we release the file?
Because we haven't decided not to pursue a commercial lease agreement yet. It's still an option, so presumably that wouldn't, you suggested it could be released now, but I'm just seeking clarification that it wouldn't be released until after a final decision.
Julie is going to clarify.
What an excellent question. I think that I might need to get some advice on that. We can clarify by council. I think probably we can. It would be in the interest of the consultation process to release it sooner so that it can be part of the consultation discussions, particularly for the Keisha Birch board to be able to respond to that. Stuart's nodding at me, so I think we'll go with that.
But it wouldn't prejudice a future decision
no, because
to...
it's just releasing the information,
Okay,
and the commercially sensitive information will still be redacted, so
Okay.
that will never, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Naylor.
Just while Julie was there, I was going to ask a quick other question, if that's all right, in regards to the consultation and further information, if it's required.
I think we've had the opportunity to ask questions about all
Okay.
of these recommendations, so I'm not going to take questions on that at this stage.
Okay, so I'll make a comment then.
Absolutely.
So I'm happy, obviously, to support this consultation process. I guess I just like to make the comment that I think, as much as possible, I think we need to reinforce the message that we're interested in feedback on all options through that process, and as much as possible indicate to the community that it's not a predetermined position. I mean, I'm certainly interested in us along the way exploring other options if and when that's appropriate, and so I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you. Absolutely agree with those comments from Councillor Naylor. But my reflection as we go out to public consultation is I'm not sure how much the public understand the high level of scrutiny that an asset of council being part of a CCO puts that asset under. So our CCOs, including Keisha Birch, but the Regent's here, the Globe, Tamanna will turn up later, are in the public forum every quarter talking about what they're doing, how they're doing it, and their accountability for the use of public funds. That is an onerous expectation. We hear that from them all of the time. But my concern with going to public consultation is that the community don't know that. They don't know the high bar that our CCOs have to reach in terms of that transparency. And it's easy to say that bringing things in-house might be the better option. We put that up as our straw man. But things are much less transparent once they come inside. There wouldn't be the clear line of sight to this particular loved asset. And I think that might be something that does come back out of public consultation. I would certainly hope that our community reflects on how much transparency they want about the use of this facility, and hope that's something we can consider through that. But being no further comments, we will put these two recommendations to vote. Which is carried unanimously. Thank you, everybody. So move to item 9 on our agenda, which is the Cultural Council Controlled Organisations Annual Report 2019 to 20. The report is presented by Julie MacDonald, which we will take as read. Julie will be hovering in the background to provide support to our CCOs as they come to present their annual reports. So the first one is Keisha Birch, deliberately, so that we can keep all of their things together. So welcome back to the table, Grant and Nikki. Thank you so much for bearing with us this morning while we've been through all of these different elements that have involved you, and ask you what you'd like to say to us about your 1920 annual report.
Not a lot. This will be much briefer than the previous discussion. I have a number of comments I'd like to make in response to those that I'd heard, but obviously this is not the time.
I appreciate your forbearance on that. Let's try to stick to the annual report, recognising that is difficult.
Really, there's not a lot we need to say about the annual report. It's there in front of you, and I hope you've all read it and understood it. You'll know that it was a difficult year, but up until, for the first 6 months anyway, we'd had a very good start and things were going extremely well. There's nothing much we can say about the effects of COVID other than that they were disastrous. Nevertheless, business has been coming back and we are currently doing quite well. If you have a look at the finances, you'll see that that if you remove the depreciation from the figures, which we've talked about before, but the depreciation of $20,000 doesn't belong to the board, it belongs to council, and in fact shouldn't be in there. And if you remove that, you'll see that we would have ended the year in the black. So we're reasonably happy with that. We acknowledge the assistance of the wages subsidy in that, but we did nevertheless manage to cope within the parameters that were available to us. So unless, Nikki, you have so really have nothing further to add to that, and we'll take any questions.
Thank you. Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, Grant and Nikki. I just had a question on page 89 of our order papers, where there's a comment that the PNCC audit grant budgeted was not received. Did that come in after the end of year, or have you not received that?
That's a very complicated thing where there is a disagreement, a stark disagreement between the board and the council officers as to the timing of the original assistance that was provided by council towards audit fees. And due to some complex paperwork, the council officers determined that the amount that we received related to the current year and not the previous year. So they said, you've had your money and you can't have it again. We thought it was relating to the previous year. So in fact, we then had to absorb the $9,000 audit fee for that current year. Even though you may recall that the Mayor thought that it was worthwhile to give assistance to the board to cover that. And that whole process was all part of the issue of whether Katia Birch was going to continue as a CCO or become something less than that. I may say that although we've had a letter from council officers to the effect that that we're required to act like a CCO, we still haven't had an answer as to whether we are a CCO in terms of the resolution by council having been revoked. But that's where we are with that $9,000 figure.
So I'm not 100% clear from your answer, but you were expecting $9,000 in the 1920 year, which didn't arrive.
No.
Half of that.
Half of that, yes. Half of that. Yes, we were. Sorry, we weren't getting the full 9,000 from council. We were getting 4.5.
Right. So, okay. So you're expecting 4.5, and when you chased it up, you were told you'd had it in the previous year for the 1920 year.
Your audit's done after a financial year, and so the account is paid after the end of that financial year, and council officers, when we went to apply for it, said, no, you've already had that money in that financial year, but that was accrued backwards. It was an accounting thing. So we were told that it hadn't been budgeted in this current year, so we've absorbed it. Well, we will be, because we haven't had that bill yet. They're only about to do our audit.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Harpeter.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks very much for your report. Just looking at the wage subsidy, so you received $44,000 odd. Did you, in that time, have to let any casual staff go?
We didn't let any staff go. We kept all of our staff and paid them 100% of the hours that they work.
Okay. And since then, have you let any staff go?
We've had one staff member finish. She was a student and needed to do her exams, and another one's also resigned just to go on to do other things, really, but not through our own doing.
Mm-hmm.
And we reimbursed the government part of the subsidy that was applicable to that person.
Oh, good. Okay, thank you.
I had a question about a couple of items in your statement of service performance element. Notable heritage trees receive maintenance. I just say it's 2 trees and then it's 4 trees and then it's back to 2. Are there is that general maintenance or is it specific maintenance about trees that have issues?
It's about our notable trees being on a revolving sort of plan, if you like. They do require dead wood removal, rot removal to keep them safe. So we just make sure that there's 1 or 2 done each year. It's often done through the summer. And hopefully after we've had most major storms, because sometimes you sort of got to choose a different tree.
So how many notable trees do you have on the property?
There must be about 10, I guess, because we've got a couple of groups. There might even be more than that.
Okay, thank you. And my other question, it's on the same page actually. There's a performance measure about percentage of respondents satisfied with visitor experience, so reporting really high levels of satisfaction. I just wanted to get some background to that as to how you gather that feedback and what kind of numbers that percentage is.
We often receive cards, emails. We have a little feedback form that's placed in there. I guess we have very much a face-to-face contact with people. I guess it's based on the fact that we haven't actually had any written complaints or complaints come straight to the board. The numbers probably, I don't know, I can't remember now, it's a while ago, but there'd probably be about 30 or 40 that were written to us, but it's very hard to quantify when you're dealing with the verbal because we make a note in our diary, but we don't always have it. The hardest thing that we find is to actually capture all that data. I think it has to be remembered that we've got clients that have been coming to Keisha Birch that are regular users there weekly, monthly, and have been for 10 or 20 years, and you go back to them time after time with the same question and they sort of start to look at you like, well, you know, how often do we have to answer the same question?
Yes, I'm sure. Thank you for that. Those were my questions, and there don't seem to be any more questions, so thank you for coming in today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Grant. If I can invite the representatives of the Regent Theatre Trust Board to come down. Elected members, that starts at page 91 of your papers with the Regent's statement of intent documents into their annual plan report. We'll note that the chair, David Lee, was here earlier but was unable to stay due to our extended break for Armistice Day. So thank you to those who remain. We'll hand over, and I will take the opportunity to welcome Kathy.
Oh, stole my thunder.
We'll hand over to you.
I was going to say this is an opportunity to introduce our new General Manager, Kathy Watson, and to welcome her to what is probably going to be a few more visits to the Council. I'm not going to reiterate the problems we faced. We all know what we faced. I think we've come through it remarkably well. This year started extremely well with a lot of shows, and then, of course, we've been managing to keep afloat. Like everybody else, we sought government funding for our staff. We managed to retain all staff at full cost for their salaries. During that time, however, we had the very unexpected resignation of our long-time manager, Charles Forbes, and one of our smaller staff members who has gone on to another job. But it was certainly their choices, not because we had to let anyone go. We also, I guess, became quite well known nationally with our way of getting around the problem of having being able to put on a live production during the lockdown. And coming up, well, it wasn't actually the board's idea, it was actually, I give it to Alan Nagy from Act 3, who came up with the ingenious solution of dividing the theatre into 4 areas. And I don't know if anyone went to the show at that time. The theatre didn't look at its best, I must admit, with all the barriers, but it solved the problem, and we were very lucky that we have so many different areas that also have toilets, so that we're able to keep everyone separated at that time. Compliments to Act 3, to our acting general manager, who turned up every night to just make sure that people understood why they couldn't go and just talk to their friend over there. And the ushers, our front of house ushers, the Friends of the Regent, who turned up for the rest of the season and did an amazing job keeping everyone calm. And so we actually were able to fulfil that booking, and that meant that Abby came through relatively unscathed, and it also helped our financial status. I guess at this stage it is interesting that a lot of the things we had planned are not going to be able to go ahead now, and one of the things is actually looking at our projected finances, and as you can imagine, they are not looking good. And because most of the touring and the long-term promoters that have been coming through are not able to bring their product, our new general manager, Kathy, is now looking at a whole variety of other areas that we need to tap into. But along with that, and a lot of the maintenance issues that are going to cost at this stage, you know, in the double figure thousands, they're going to put a huge effect on our reserves. We are very lucky and we're very grateful that we do have those reserves, but they're not much. And I'll tell you what, replacing the flies ropes is going to eat into that. Will be virtually a quarter into our reserves, and so we are going to have to go out and do a lot of fundraising and sponsorship to alternative places. At this stage, I think all of us are very happy that we have come through in a relatively unscathed way at this stage, and doing our best to make sure that the theatre is still functioning at its top capacity. We've had some amazing events recently, Kapahaka yesterday, Feathers flew, and everyone had a wonderful time. So it is good to see that the community are still wanting to come out and take part in the aspects of arts and culture. So I'll leave it up to any questions.
Thank you, Susan, and always lovely to see you coming in and representing the board. I did have a question actually about the COVID impact on the Friends of the Regent. So recognising that the Friends organisation is largely older, with maybe some health concerns, did you find that the Friends were still able to support particularly that Act 3 production in the way they normally would?
By that stage, definitely when we were in level 3, you're quite right, there was nothing going on, and I'm very thankful actually, because we wouldn't have asked our older people to come in. But by level 1, I think the fact that there was no transmission in the city, they'd been isolated, doing all the things that they needed to do to keep themselves safe. They were actually saying they were actually very healthy. And we had all the part of our strategic plan about why we could go ahead was there were masks at the start of where you came in, or in all sections. People could choose to wear them. There was sanitizer everywhere. And the social distancing was as best as we could do, but at that stage it wasn't actually a requirement. And they were, I think, I'd have to ask the acting general manager, but I think if anyone was uncomfortable, they would have said so and would have stayed away. But that was very much at our core of dealing with them, being aware that they are older and in that area of health, that we didn't want them at risk.
Thank you. And that certainly supports what I read from the President, Peter Doherty, the President's report, but I just wanted to check in on that. Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thank you. I've got a couple of questions. They're quite specific. One is on page 141 of our papers, and in your report it's under statistics for the year ended 30 June 2020. And I see that in the top table there you've got total number of days open for business, and for the last few years it's been 308. Now you've put 308 for the year 2019 to 20, but actually I assume that you weren't open for business that number of days because you would have been closed during COVID. And I just wondered, is that an oversight, or is there some reason why it's 308 there? And if I just to give some background to my question, I think in future reports it's important for us to be aware that the theatre was closed for a good period of time, and therefore numbers about usage need to be taken in that context.
Agreed. I put the report together in a very short space of time because the General Manager had left. The figure of 308, I believe, was calculated. That's the 308 days a year that the theatre is available, because there is, over the Christmas New Year period when nothing happens, so those days are taken out. And it is an oversight for this financial year that that figure was put in there, whereas we could have taken out the COVID period as well.
I just think, in 2 or 3 years' time, it may not be immediately obvious to people why the figures were so low for that year, and so it'd be good either to asterisk it with a note or to change the number of days. That's just my comment. My other question is on page 156 of our papers, which is notes to the financial statements in your paper. And it's about the promotion costs. So I see under number 2, theatre operations expenditure, that the advertising and promotion for the current financial year, or 1920, was about 50% higher than in 1819. And I wondered if you could talk to that or just explain why that is. So we're looking at 47345 for this year compared to 32434 for the previous year.
No, I can't comment on that. I'd have to look back and we get that information to you. That figure was taken from the accounts supplied by BDO. So
okay, I just wondered if there was
a
new initiative or something. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Susan, David and Kathy. Just 2 questions. One is quite specific as well. It's on page 127 of our papers, and that's page 10 of your report. And just reading through there, it's obviously well understood that COVID has brought overall numbers right back because basically you had to shut the door. What I didn't really understand was that potential impact on the ratio of commercial and community revenue, because I sort of would have thought that those ratios wouldn't have been as influenced by COVID. But was there some timing around when the commercial revenues were expected that made it particularly hard to get those ratios in this 12-month context?
Because COVID came in March, and we had a lot of commercial bookings for April, May, and June. A lot of those shows were either cancelled or transferred to further years. So they did have a big impact. Your commercial shows, if they're touring from overseas, they come out here sometimes in the off season and from overseas, and we found that April, May, and June has always been very heavily booked with commercial events.
Great, thanks. That clarifies that for me. The other question related to just a point further on in the report, where it looked like it had been a few years since you had gotten a Communitrack survey number on sort of satisfaction. I guess generally have the question of what's being done to keep a finger on the pulse of sort of customer experience there.
don't like to blame everything on COVID, but that was something we had identified towards the end of last year, that this was going to be something that we were really going to start work on, and February and then March hit, and of course there was nothing to do, and that's actually still a high priority, because we agree 3 years is not enough. Every 3 years is not enough to give us an idea of where we're going and how we're achieving, and our big focus is on that total experience of going to theatre, not just what's on stage, but everything that goes about buying your ticket right through. And I guess this is actually probably the first full-time meeting that we'll have with Kathy, and these are the kinds of things that will be raised at this meeting. Have you got something?
A sentence to that.
Yep. Bush. Yep.
Hello. Sorry, just adding a sentence to that. At the first board meeting I attended, which was before my start date, that was mentioned there, and I have done a little bit of work to speak to the next board meeting about. Currently we do survey our hirers in terms of their satisfaction level, but I have done some initial work on in unobtrusive ways that we can survey patrons coming through the door attending events as well. It's very difficult to pin them down and ask them physical questions. It's really quite intrusive and impacts negatively on their experience in the venue. So I have just done some initial looking at tools, and I'll need to obviously research the costs of those and ways that we can get at least an indication of people's experience, if not quotes or comments that go alongside that.
Great, thanks for that feedback. One final question, if I might, which I suppose just reflecting on the year that has been, and undoubtedly I would think that's going to have some flow-on effects into the year coming, and sort of your levels of comfort with the numbers that are in the multi-year statement of intent, and sort of what you might, if anything, want to signal to us there.
Well, yes, I mean, new SOI is going to be different. I have to mention too that we did actually take on board what you recommended. One of the things we've done in our new 10-year operation and business plan is we have condensed our goals down to 3. So that was one thing we took from you that we've done. Yes, it's going to be an interesting going back and look at what we hope to achieve and what we think we're going to be able to achieve. And it is going to be a bit up in the air, but it is also very interesting to see what's coming through nationally. Crowded house, sold out in 3 hours. Wow. So too late if you've wanted to get your tickets now. So it's things like that, seeing what else is going on and around that we can pull into the town that may be offsetting what we can have. But I think the other thing, if you actually looked at some of those stats, it's our community group as the higher user, may not be the bigger money earner, but in terms of operation and actually use of the theatre, they are our absolute godsend at the moment. And at the moment, it looks like they're all carrying on as normal as best they can, as long as we don't get another lockdown.
Great.
Is that okay?
Thanks for that insight. That's really helpful, Madam Chair.
We're all touching wood there for they don't get another lockdown. Councillor Harpeter.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks very much for your report. I just wanted to ask a question around your wages and salaries. Did you apply for the wage subsidy at all?
Yes.
It's just not represented in here. Maybe I can't see it. I'm on page 157 of the report.
157. That one.
Just might be there and I can't read it. Oh, you can see it? Okay,
57.
that is here.
Employee related.
They may well be included in there.
Yeah.
We're saying page 149, there's a line
149.
item.
149.
Yeah, COVID-19 wage subsidy received $65,805 under the 2020 year.
So 65,000, how many staff did you cover for that?
That covered the general manager, the administration officer / finance officer, the 2 technicians, the operations assistant, and the promotions.
Great.
Also included was the 2 part-time ticket sellers and the 3 part-time, or the 3 casual front of house managers.
And so you managed to keep them all on during that period?
Yes, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. I had a question just on page 42 of your report, notes to the financial statements. And I think we know the answer to this, but it has been regularly asked, I think, by Councillor Finlay, and since he's not here today, I will ask it. Employee costs payable, lieu hours owing. In 2019, we were showing just short of 5,000 hours owing, and we've seen a marked decrease in that into 2020 of 157. Would you care to comment on how you achieved that?
Well, I didn't achieve it. The general manager left. He had quite a number of hours owing, and also the technicians as well also had a number of hours owing, and sort of they've taken some leave, and we've got it down to a very manageable figure, and I know it's being closely watched now and monitored.
Could you just explain for us how people accrue all those hours owing? How is that possible?
Well, the technicians are on an 80-hour fortnight to be worked any time of day or night or any day of the week. Anything over those 80 hours is time in lieu. And some of the shows, you know, they'll pack in at 8 o'clock in the morning, and they'll pack out at 2 o'clock next morning, working continuously. And we're sort of still trying to give the techs some breaks, but still having the backstage area covered. And those hours can build up very quickly. But good management will help keep those down. I can't comment with regard to the previous general manager, his hours and lieu, but I think that was over a period of 20 years that had built up.
So what I'm hearing you say, David, is it works to provide flexibility around supporting your non-standard hours environment. Is that a fair summary?
Agreed.
There are no further questions, so thank you very much. If you'd like to step back into the gallery, we will move to invite the Globe representatives to come down. We have Jerry Keating, manager, Margaret May, board member, Russell Harris, board member. Thank you all 3 for being with us through today and coming to present your annual report for 1920. In your hands. Nice to see you in person. This is Jerry's first time in the chamber, I think, is it, Jerry? Because you were on the screen last time.
I was here last year's annual report. Just
Doesn't time
kind
fly?
of passing.
Madam Chair, before Jerry starts, could I just put an apology in for Maxine Dale,
Your chair.
our chairperson?
Thank you, Margaret. Appreciate it.
Actually, I'd just like to add John Adams and Jared Hudson as well. They were hoping to be here, but circumstances. I did have a bit of a waffle written down, but I've shortened it because I know I do tend to waffle when I write my reports. Obviously, it's a pleasure to present my first Globe Theatre Trust annual report for 2019-2020. Not exactly what I was expecting when I took on the role of manager last October, but it goes without saying that stating the obvious that it has been a bit of a crazy year. However, as the annual report shows, the theatre has continued to grow, even during the COVID-19 lockdown. Just wanted to kind of bring on a point from what Harry mentioned this morning, is that that the Globe is recognised nationally as a wonderful community theatre. And that is shown by the number of repeat bookings that we receive from both local and national organisations and artists. We are primarily a venue for hire, so when people inquire, we work with them to obviously facilitate all their needs and their desires and to help grow the community and the art scene in Palmerston North. Accordingly, we are continuing to seek outside funding for equipment upgrade and replacement. As our number of performances increase, so does the need to keep our equipment up to date. Like most of us know, phones and computers change every year, and it's no different with sound equipment and projectors and screens, etc., etc. But unfortunately, I don't mean this as a bad thing, it's just that with COVID, we are experiencing a few issues in getting quotes because a lot of the equipment is brought over from overseas. And we are finding that some of the businesses that we've worked with before are unable to kind of get a quote or guarantee when something might come in. So we're working with those businesses and with the funding agencies to, find workarounds. Obviously, it has been a fantastic year. Obviously, COVID did have a huge impact on us. We were very fortunate that we had a wonderful group of patrons and hirers who worked with us to move dates, reschedule concerts and performances. A lot of our patrons just didn't bother taking refunds. They just moved to when the next show was coming on. So for us, it was great to see that we had that support within our community. It would have been very easy for people to say, I want a refund, and we would have to give back $5,000, $10,000, $15,000, but instead they were happy to move on to when the show came up next. Huge thank you to the council staff during the lockdown period. I know there was a lot of things happening, but there was constant emails and phone calls from the council staff. And I'd also like to point out to the facilities management officers who have been working with us over the last few months to, keep our maintenance on a good schedule. So really appreciate that support. Thank you very much. I don't know if Russell or Margaret might want to.
I would just like to add that, the Globe looks good, it feels good, and we survey both our audiences and our performers, and the feedback that we get from both is just phenomenal. So as a board, we are exceedingly happy. It was a change for us having Jerry come on board after Denise, and we're delighted with the way that we are progressing in terms of number of groups that are coming, the diversity of groups, and the size of the audiences.
Thank you. So are you happy to take questions? Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, Jerry and team. I've just got one question, which is about the tables on page 203, and specifically table 6, which is employee and contractor related costs. So I note that from the SOI budget of 81,000, the actual for salaries, wages and employment related costs was 118,383, which is about a 46% increase. And I wondered if you could speak to why that was.
Obviously in October last year, myself and there was a new manager and assistant manager appointed to the Globe Theatre. To ease that transition, the outgoing manager stayed on until the end of the year, working reduced hours as we went through, but it was definitely seen as a requirement to ensure the smooth transition from Denise running everything to myself and Jay coming on board.
So it's those handover expenses, you're not expecting that level of cost to continue?
There was an additional staff member that we as a board thought was absolutely critical to have there. Denise had some part-time support, but we decided it was time to move on and to add a part-time permanent assistant manager. So our overall employment expenses went up and there was the cost of the transition.
Okay, so those two things. So are you expecting that level of employment expense that you are now, that you have planned for going forward, is that going to be sustainable?
I'm hoping that Jerry doesn't disappear, so we have to do another transitional. I would imagine that they would come down slightly, but we are continuing with that assistant manager's role. So yes, there'll be an increase in this area, and that's just the busyness. And I guess, the odd hours that probably you've heard already about today, is that we're not open 9 to 5, we're open 9 to midnight. So it's important to have permanent staff who know what they're doing on when there are performances on, as well as during the day. The expectation is that we are open during the day as well.
No, I understand that. I guess my question is more a financial one, that you feel confident of being able to sustain that new level of employment.
Yep.
Yeah.
We do get funding also from DIA to go towards salaries, so.
Thank you.
Councillor Naylor.
Thank you. Thanks for the report and coming in today. So I was pleased on page 197 of our papers to see the comfortable surplus this year, and it was a bit of a surprise actually given the COVID environment. I noticed the same with the previous, with the Regent, it was a stronger surplus. And so I'm just interested to see that one of the areas that has obviously performed stronger than what you're expecting is in your donations and fundraising, and that was also a surprise to me in the current environment. So I'm just wondering if you could, it's really positive obviously to be able to attract that level of revenue. Can you make any comment on whether that's changed with the COVID environment, or why you believe you've been in a stronger position to attract that funding this year?
The donations and fundraising, in partly was we did get funding for our Globe One lighting rig, and we also had the COVID wage subsidy of 34,000, which actually fits into that donations, fundraising, and other similar income. So that's why there was quite a huge jump of 57,000 from 2019 to 2020, and that was all part of the 2019-2020 year.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks, Jerry, and good to see you all here. Just one query of you in the report, and just trying to, I guess, understand some of the methodology around the customer satisfaction work that you do. So it's on page 193 of our papers. I don't know if that's helpful direction for you or not.
Sorry, Brent, was that 183 or 193?
193. Just at the top there where you refer to the numbers responding to surveys, it says surveys responded 119. I'm just trying, is that 119 people that overall have responded to surveys, or is it 119 surveys that were?
No, that's the people that responded. A bit like what Cathy might have mentioned there from the Regent Theatre, obviously, and I think Nikki mentioned with Keisha Birch. We send out a survey every month to people who attend the Globe Theatre. Now, obviously, if they've come for a free event or a community event where it might be door sales, we obviously don't have that email information. So these is using SurveyMonkey. We send out a survey to all our patrons that we have on our database that attended for that month. There's no point asking somebody how a show was in October if they didn't attend during October. And we get their feedback. And we do the same thing with all our hires. We actually survey all our hires as well, so we can get some feedback about how the theatre is performing.
Yeah, I saw the numbers there around hirers as well. So I guess the question that comes out of that for me then is that out of your total sort of audience numbers, you're tapping into less than 1% in terms of surveys, because you sort of 15,000 plus audience and less than 120 survey responses. So I guess from your point of view as a manager, and I guess from the board's point of view, are you comfortable that you've tapped in deeply enough to sort of audience feedback at less than 1%?
Obviously, I'd like a lot more. A lot of the time, we may not have email addresses for all those people that attended, so our audience numbers are based on our ticket sales, and obviously when we talk to the people who do the performances, especially if they're community or free events, we don't actually have ticket sales coming through, so we'll ask the organisers roughly how many people may have attended today. So obviously when we have 15,000, 16,000 people attending, we only have a small percentage of email addresses for those people. A lot of people who purchase tickets over the counter don't want to give email addresses as well, so it's trying to convince people, hey, we're not going to bombard you all the time, the usual. And of course, it's just getting people to reply. Cathy did mention, I have looked at whether we try and capture people as they come out of the theatre, but I am very fearful of the fact that people are coming out, they've just had a really nice show. The last thing they want is somebody standing there going, can you quickly tell me? So we discussed this last year. I think you would have brought it up last year again. It's just trying to find that solution that meets what we're looking for.
Thanks for that
Yeah.
explanation and comment on it, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I just had a couple of questions. I think one of the unusual ways the Globe operates is your focus on MOU partners. And I noticed in your report that you've lost one this year. So I wonder if you wanted to comment on that and the implications for your...
Yeah, not a problem. We actually don't see it as a loss because Rose, came to the Globe with a brand new fledgling business, and over time was able to grow it to a position where she was able to take that step and get her own studio. So we actually see that as a huge plus in the sense that, she went from 4 or 5 people now having her own studio on Princess Street. We have been able to replace Rose Academy with Equippers Church. So we've got them coming in now on a regular basis.
It's all good.
Yes.
Great. And then I just wanted to seek a comment on what's happening with the cafe space, please. I think there might be a COVID impact there.
Well, we took over the hospitality cafe area from the 1st of July. So it's now under our control. It is run by the Globe Theatre.
If I may add, Madam Chair, the COVID, I think, was the most difficult time for the cafe. And they made the decision to call it a day.
Okay, understandable. Thank you. I just wanted to check that. There are no further comments, questions. So thank you, 3 of you, for coming in. Thank you back to the board that you represent. We still have Te Manawa to go, and they are coming in after the lunch break. So we said we would break at 1. And we'll get into comments at that point. You may well not be back after lunch. So I'll take the opportunity just as we break to say thank you to the 3 organisations represented. We'll formally be voting on this later. But apart from that, you can take back our heartfelt thanks to your boards, to your staff, and to the volunteers that support your organisations. We're very grateful for all of the work that you do and the time that you take to come and tell us all about it. So thank you very much. Elected members, we will break for lunch and recommence at 2. Thank you.